Hello? Hello? There I am, hello. Welcome back to another stream. Code Katas this time. I'm starting from the bottom. So I wanted to fully start over on my Code Katas so I could stream some simpler ones for y'all. Plus I have this Ched Dev account now, which I use for all my streaming stuff. All my stuff's on my old account. My old account right now I'm at, I think, like a 5 queue, but I would expect if you're a beginner to be more around 7, 8. The higher the number, the easier it is, so it's backwards. So I did an initial sign up and I'm just at 8Q right now. I have 3 points because I did a first task they made me just do when I sign up, a JavaScript one. So we're gonna start with some 8s and then we'll work our way to 7s. 6s are, I would say, a good level to be at. 6 is solving a lot of really common problems, but you might not be there until you've actually got some work experience, or if you really do drill on the Code Katas a lot. As they get really high, like I'm starting to look at like 4s and stuff, 5s and 4s. They start getting pretty complex, even for me. Of course, I mean I'm a master dev, but whatever. No. They get complex. They can get very algorithmic and computer sciencey. I would say they're not really real world as much, but there is some that they're more real world, but they're just a lot more work. So I've been putting together a list from a while ago of Code Katas. This is the list right here, and I only have some bigger ones in there right now because I was putting together this list for a friend who was interviewing, so they already had some dev experience. They were not new, and so I wanted them to be mainly doing 6s. If you're interviewing for jobs, I would kind of think you'd be around here. 7s can be like a queue time counter. I have that one, but I'm gonna write down the ones that I like when I go along the way. I did write down some information, some tips that I have. So Code Katas aren't always ideal problems, but they do use common coding skills like splitting data, joining data, manipulating data different ways with data structures, etc. There might be more that I can add to this if I think about it along the way, but there's a lot of possible solutions to one problem. You can do it several different ways. We're gonna do it a couple different ways, but the easiest solution might not be the most ideal. And what I mean by the most ideal is that I like to write code for maintainability, even though I'm in Code Katas. Code Katas like a write it one and done. It's kind of hacky a lot of the time. A lot of the examples and solutions you're gonna see in the end are pretty hacky because people just like to do it like that. If you're looking to get a job in development, I would recommend focusing more on the clean code style. So I would say you refactor it after you have the working solution so you can convert it to more clean code. And clean code means like readable code. There's a lot of different rules around it. If you search for clean code, it's kind of like an ideology of what nice code looks like. And so if you're in the area of writing the code, but you want to make it more maintainable, you want to start working on a team, those kinds of things, I think you should be looking into clean code and looking at how to write clean code. That's one of the first big milestones to bump you up to a mid-level developer. Learning how to use common JS built-in methods. I might rewrite that, but off the top of your head, so things like split, map, filter, find, array methods, string methods. I might add some more along the way. You'll see how those come in handy. And don't go for the shortest solution, since you will probably not write production code like that. If you want to do it for fun, that's totally cool. But for like practicing your coding skills, you're not really going to write it like that in the real world, because other people are not going to allow that to happen. Regex is okay for a solution, but try to solve it without regex when you're developing your code skills. Regex is a specific type of code that kind of like parses the text in different things to extract things out. And it's really fun to do in a hacky way, and it feels really good when you get it working, but you're probably not going to be writing regex solutions for these problems in the real world, because your team members need to be able to understand your code and modify it and all that. So don't just get a regex and move on to the next solution. You can do a regex, but then also try solving it without regex to make sure you can actually do it yourself. And try to account for varying data types, invalid user data, and missing data. What I mean by that is, like, sometimes, we expect something to be a string, but it might not be a string. It might be something else. And if you're using TypeScript in an application, you have that kind of protection, but in Code Katas, you don't have that kind of protection. So they throw those kind of edge cases in there from time to time, so you gotta be aware of those, that those could be causing the problem. And invalid user data might be, a user submitted it with an empty value, or they submitted it in the wrong format, or anything like that. So you're doing kind of a more defensive coding style in Code Katas, and even in the real world. But my cat's scratching my couch. Even in the real world, but in the real world, you'll have TypeScript, but it's not going to protect you from things like missing data. Always, you might be pulling data from a database and something might be missing. So just be prepared for that. Think about those kinds of edge cases that you can catch when you're writing out your solutions. I might solve it for what they call the happy path, which is everything is assumed to be correct. You're supposed to have the data that is right, like they gave you valid data, everything's good. You solve for that and then go back and fix these little edge cases. Like, well, what if it starts with a bad character? What if it does this? I'll try to see if we can make some examples of that while we're coding along. And also, so what are Code Katas? Code Katas are just code exercises, basically. Code Katas is the name of like a category for solving little code challenges. And Code Wars is a site that hosts a bunch of Code Katas. So frequently when we're talking about Code Wars, we're talking about this actual website. When we're talking about Code Katas, we're talking about the actual solving of code challenges. Because there's other sites that have these Code Katas. I think like Leet Code, HackerRank, which is used a lot in interviews. They're basically Code Katas, but on a different kind of hosted platform. It's another company that targets people who are interviewing, and they rank your skills on stuff like that. So Code Wars is generally the go-to when you're training on your own by yourself, but there's plenty of other sites that have Code Katas as well. Code Wars has some of the easiest ones, I would say, and they start out pretty easy and basic from the beginning. HackerRank is more like people who are trying to compete for, high knowledge, and you're trying to show off their skills and stuff like that. So there's a few options out there. Anything else that I wanted to mention before we get started? I don't think so. Let me check. Okay. Feel free to ask any questions in the chat. If you have questions along the way, stop me, let me know. Otherwise, I'm just going to try to tell you what I think you should know. Okay, let's start with some 8Qs. I want to go to the chat here. Next. So, they just suggest some for me. I guess I'm always doing them all in JavaScript here. They started on rank up, and if that's the case, they give you higher levels, but I'm going to start with fundamentals and just kind of do what they suggest. You can look up your own. How do you find them? If you want to run your own, I think you can go into practice and you can do more fine tune. Let's see. Yeah, so here I can like search a specific one. I can see a bunch here. I can mark down the difficulty. So let's say I just want to do some 8Qs right now. I can see all these. A lot of them they can run in different languages as well. I'm doing JavaScript, but you can solve this same problem in different languages. If you want to learn other languages, that's a great idea to come back and like do it in Python and do it in different languages. You'll learn some of those. There's usually some information stats with them. Stars, just how many people favorited it. Let's see. It's in 50 different collections. 92% of users gave a positive rating to it. Sometimes there's bad katas. They're formed bad and not great. So total times this kata has been completed, 21,000, and then the user who submitted it. And it gives you some tags about what it could be about. Fundamentals is going to be your bare bones kind of basic stuff. Algorithms is going to be a little more problem solving. You have to kind of think of, it's more like a word problem, like this was what is between, so I'm guessing it's going to give us some numbers and say something like, is this number between these numbers, different kinds of things like that. You're doing programmatic actions to be able to solve the problem. There's another setting in here, status approved, and you can sort by, instead of newest, you could sort by like positive feedback, because something very new could be not, they could have issues. Sometimes they have issues, people report issues on them, but if you do ones with like the most positive feedback, then there's a good chance that it should be decent. Even or odd, this is a good one. 3 issues. The issues could be with other languages though, because there is so many. Let's start with even or odd. Cypher, what's up, man? How's it going? Good to see you again. Day stream today. I don't normally stream during the day. I like that nighttime coding, you know? Okay, so when you come here, it kind of gives you some information about it. I usually just hop directly into, there's a lot of light in my place, yeah. Just go into train. Next kata would like skip it, but you can click into train. I'm not gonna read this because I know how it works. But basically it'll give us the information here, the instructions on the left. We can see the output of what our output is when we run it. Sometimes the instructions are good, sometimes they're terrible, sometimes they don't match up with the problem here. So some of the harder ones later on might be just figuring out what people are what they're trying to get you to do. You can change your language. If you want to change your language up here, you can change your node version. You probably don't need to do that. If you want to get fancy, the editors, etc., etc. What it does is it has tests behind it. So the tests are going to verify that our code is working correctly, and we fill in our code in here. So you don't need to modify these tests. You should be able to just leave them, but you can kind of read them to see what it's going to ask for you or ask of you. Let me see if I zoom it out one. No, I don't know why it's like got that button kind of hanging off the bottom there. you can see what it's actually going to test it for and what it expects. So if you do test, it's going to run my code and it's going to show me these sample tests. Once you actually submit it, there's going to be a lot more tests behind it usually. Like this might have, 10, okay, this has 5 tests in it, but they might run 10 full tests behind the code to see. So even or odd, I'm going to guess they just want us to make sure that it's even or odd. Create a function that takes an integer as an argument. Oh, and thanks for the follow, T-War in Scheme 0. Takes an integer as an argument and returns even for even numbers or odd for odd numbers. So they're gonna give us a number here. If you're curious about what it is, you can use your console logs in here as well. So I'm gonna console log a number. And usually when I'm console logging stuff, I like to make it an object, because what this is going to do, it's going to give this name with it as well. So for example, when I run test, you'll see I'll see numbers. So if I'm logging multiple things out, I can see what the actual values were. So the number in the first one, 2, is even, 7 is odd, -42 is even. Interesting. So they're going to give us some negative numbers too. -7 and 0. So those are all the ones we have to solve for. If you want to be brute forcey, what that means is you just write code like kind of hacker style and get it working and get it going. That's a good way to start, and then you can refactor it there. From there, another way to do it is to write pseudocode. Since this one is so kind of just this or that, it's not really going to be helpful, because we were just basically going to say, is the number even? Then it is odd. This would be like pseudocode. It's not actually code, this is just kind of commenting, but sometimes it's easy to fill it in like that. I know how to check for a number even in JavaScript, but let's assume we didn't. Let's say how to check if a number is even in JavaScript. Assuming you will know the kind of some of the basic functionality, you can search things here. This is just straight cheating, if you're doing basic Code Katas. But there's this %sign here. I'm gonna copy and paste this for now. So they said, if that then return the string even, and I'll test it, and that should pass some of them. Okay, it passes a couple. 2 is even, -42 is even, and then I could do the same here. I could just say else, actually, return odd, because if it's not even, it's gonna be if else, And there you go, it's all passed. So it's passing all the tests. Simple as that. What this is a modulo operator, and that one's a tricky one to learn. You're gonna have to spend some time with that on your own. But what it's doing is it's giving you the remainder of the number. So say the number is 7, and it's going to say, okay, give me the remainder of this number going into this number. So it's gonna be like, okay, we're gonna say 7 minus 2, and then it's gonna start over, minus 2, and that brings us, let's do minus 2, it's gonna start over, equals 5, minus 2, equals 3, minus 2, equals 1, and then minus 2 equals -1. Is that right? No, it's not going to do another minus 2 in the last one, so it's going to be equal to 1, but since the next number would be negative, it's going to compare it each time, and it's going to say, is 1 greater than or equal to 2? And it's not. So it's going to give us back 1. But there's a few ways to write this. So you could write it with an if-else like this. This is pretty basic. Let me delete my comments. A lot of times I like to shorten this down to a ternary. So in this case, I could just return, well, actually first what you might do is you might say like const result equals, and then you basically just take this part of the if and you put it here, and there's a question mark, and the first thing is going to be if it's true. So if it's true, I want even, otherwise odd. Let me paste that back there and I'll leave it commented out. So when you're running these, you might write the code and like, oh yeah, this should work, and hit test and run, and then all your tests fail. And it says expected undefined to equal whatever. The hint for the undefined there, if it's like expected undefined to equal something, it's probably because you didn't return anything from this function. If you don't return anything, it defaults to undefined. So if you ever want a sanity check, just make sure to console log it. I can see there I'm getting the right result for each of them, and then eventually I would catch the error that I forgot to return it. So you can return like that. It's all passing again. It works the exact same as this. It's just a shorthand. So again, this right here is matching the if, your if clause. And then the question mark says, okay, the first thing, this is, if it's true, it's gonna do this, else do this. So it's just different syntax, but you'll see these a lot in code. I use them a lot in my code when I just wanna do a this or that value pretty easily. If it starts getting really long, if you have to do a bunch of if checks or a bunch of other code after, like you don't just return a value right away, then I won't do that. This is only for short, dirty, quick ones. And anytime you see yourself doing something like this where you console log, or you set it to a const and then immediately return it, just get rid of it and put the return in front of it. So you can do return, and then what it does is it evaluates this. It's gonna boil that down to the single value, even or odd. You can kind of think of it like this in order of operations. It's gonna boil this down to a single value, even or odd, and then it's gonna return that single value. Just like this would. Test it, does it still work? It still works. And so now I can attempt, it's gonna attempt to run all the tests. So see, it has our first sample tests up top, but then they do all these other tests as well that are kind of hidden. And those you can't see the code, what the test is doing. All you can see is the title, whatever they call it. So, cool. There was a nice first 8Q. I got 2 points for that one. Submit. And then it will take me on to the next one. And then you can see everyone else's solutions. There's a lot of different ways you can do it, of course. You can see this is what all these people, plus a lot of other people, and they basically did what we did, the ternary, so it works the same way, but instead of doing equals 0, they left that off. And the reason they left that off is because this itself is gonna boil down to a number. And anything, a 0 is false, and anything 1 and up is truthy, or true. A way that we can kind of see this is test it. If you open your little console debugger, you can use the Boolean constructor, which means convert this to a Boolean. If I do 0, I can see, okay, it's false. If I do 1, it's true. If I do 10, it's true. If you ever want to test to see what it is, just open the console and play with it. That's what I do. What about -1? It is true. Even though it's negative, it doesn't matter because it's not specifically a 0. A 0 means false. And the reason it means false is because think of binary. Binary is 0 and 1. 0 is false or off. 1 is true or on. So a lot of times people use these as these kinds of values. So that's why it ended up like that. This is basically what we copied at the beginning, or what we did in the beginning, just with different spacing. Another one. What about 0.0001? So here's a trick. How many zeros is that? JavaScript does have some problems with numbers. Let's see. Oh, that's true. Yep. Sometimes if you get too fine, it might. Yeah, so it could be a little weird. But because that's not 0 exactly, it's not false. This is basically the same thing that we wrote too, but with different, with triple equals. So someday you'll have to learn the difference between double equals and triple equals. But basically what it does is it also checks the type. So a 0 is double equal to 0. The string is true. But if you do triple, it's going to compare the type as well. And so they're not the same. This is a string of 0. This is the number 0. That's the simplest way to describe it. It can get a lot crazier though. This is just a shorthand version of what we did again, using fat arrows. And this is additional parentheses. You can add more parentheses. That won't matter. It's just going to change it can change the order of how it runs it, similar to math PEM does. This one's confusing. I don't know what that is. This is another shorthand. You can leave the curly braces off. In clean code and good code habits, I would recommend not doing this. There's reasons because it could introduce bugs. It could be confusing. JavaScript will automatically insert the curly braces for you, and that's kind of, you don't want to rely on that as a feature, ideally. All right, that's enough of those solutions. What's the next one? Has anyone worked on a kata that they've been stuck on or they're confused about? Feel free to send it my way. Sentence smash. All right, this one seems pretty easy. Just because I've done it a billion times, but. Okay, so write a function that takes an array of words and smashes them together in a sentence and returns the sentence. You can ignore any need to sanitize words or add punctuation, but you should add spaces between each word. Be careful, there shouldn't be a space at the beginning or the end of the sentence. Okay, let's try to solve this quick and dirty way. Quick and dirty way, which seems quick and dirty, but is actually a lot more code. So, if you're familiar with string concatenation in JavaScript, this should be decently easy for you. So we have the words. Let's start with a new, let's say you would do let string equal an empty string. Actually, let me call that sentence. That'll start with an empty sentence, and then I can do like a for loop. Man, how do I write the original for loop? Let I equal 0, and then words dot length bracket I plus plus. Is that right? Oh no, it's I is less than words dot length. I haven't written it like this in a while. This is kind of maybe the first thing they'll teach you. But there's better ways to do it in JavaScript now, as JavaScript has evolved. You know, this is bare bones. And this is kind of what you would see a for loop in other languages. But I don't see them too many these days. Once you start learning how to use maps and for each or those kinds of things or other for loops, you can do it a lot easier. So this would be the old school way. You might not have ever learned it. But I'll say sentence equals sentence plus the new word, words bracket I. That's going to get the word value at that case or at that spot. Add it on there, and then at the end, just make sure to return the sentence. And I think that could be it. Nope. Expected hello world to equal, oh, I didn't add the space. So this is string concatenation right here. Sentence, whatever the value of sentence is, starting out with an empty string. So around the first iteration, I would be 0. Finite, hello, happy Friday, welcome. Doing some simple code katas. Building up my rank here. So 0 is the index. Let's say I would be 0. I is less than, so this would be basically 0 is less than words.length. Let's say for this case, the one we're trying to solve for, it's going to be 2. So I is less than 2, which is true, and then it's going to increment I plus plus. And the first time sentence is going to be blank. So the sentence will be the empty string plus a space plus the first word, hello. I just write hello like that. And that would be the first run. Let's see the second run. I would be equal to 1. 1 is less than 2, which is true, so it's going to run it, and then it's going to increment it. This would now be hello from the last version. No W. Oh, see, I add a space here in the beginning. So this would actually be space, hello world, which is wrong. And then it would add another space, and then this would be world. So then in the next one, I would be 2. 2 is less than 2, which is false, so it would end. And then our string value would basically be hello space world, like that. But that's wrong. Oh, I can now replay test events in Town Dashboard. I didn't. I thought I saw you close it. Thank you, though. Thanks for adding that. I've been doing some testing with it again recently because of Railway. I put it up on Railway. I got it all working again. I basically just ended up, whenever it disconnects, I reconnect right again automatically. I don't actually do a keep alive because I'm using the WebSocket to npm ws library to connect from the WebSocket, to connect to Tau WebSocket, and that was losing the connection every 10 minutes because of the security stuff. So I fixed it on mine. It should be still going good. Ping Tau socket. So I think it was more of my problem. I don't think it was something you need to add in Tau. it was because of the way I was consuming it. When I was listening to the tau socket, I wasn't reconnecting. I would have to initiate that. I don't think you, unless if you send a ping, that would keep it alive. I don't know how that works, to be honest. But so we got this beginning space because the first time the value was empty. We could solve it with an inline ternary, but let's say we did something different. Let's say we do if sentence equals an empty string. I want to do sentence plus words, else that. Else I want to add the space. So this should solve this problem. Because the first one, it won't add the space in front, but the second one it will. There they go, they all passed. So this works, but it's, again, I would say it's not ideal. There's a lot more efficient ways to write it. This is kind of the brute force way, I would say. And first thing is I don't like this duplicated code here. This looks very similar. Anytime you see duplicated code, it's a chance for you to tighten it up and only get it down to one use, or something more dynamic where it handles that. I could change this, so let's start with this. I'll basically, again, convert it to a ternary. And just so I don't confuse myself, I'm going to start with parentheses to say like all this code in here runs together. So I'm going to check if the sentence is an empty string, then I want to use sentence, which is what I'm doing here. I'm basically only writing this part, refactoring this part in both of these to make it work. This and this. If it's empty, I want to use sentence. Otherwise, I want to use sentence plus the space. And now it's basically moved from here. I rewrote it, but it's basically moved from there. Let's see if that works. It does. Okay, so it does the same thing. It's another way to do it. I just basically took this if and made it into a ternary. However, it's very confusing to read about what it's doing. So in this case, this might have been better to leave because it's easier to read, but the easiest way to do it is to use JavaScript built-in methods. Right now we're doing it manually. We're manually joining the string together with string concatenation. JavaScript has a built-in method for this, and that is the .join. So right now we're also looping over all of this ourselves too, but with .join it does all this dirty work for us. So we've basically written the feature of .join without passing in a separator. So let's start this out. Let's comment this out. So let's see. Sentence equals words. Words is an array, and .join. What we're using is the array method, the .join array method. JS join. Array.prototype.join. This means it's something that's available on arrays. You can come here and see it. What it does is it takes all of the values and joins them to a string. So for example, if you just call .join, you don't pass anything, it's gonna do a comma separated list. That's just the default separator. If you pass it an empty string, it's going to put an empty string between each of them, which has no space, so it basically just smushes them all together. If you do a dash, it's going to join all of these values with this character that you pass in, with the value you pass in between them. And the benefit of this is you don't get the problems on the edge. You don't have like an extra space at the beginning or at the end, an extra character at the end. You don't have to account for that because it basically is doing that for you. So we can just do join. If I run it like this, you'll think, oh, why doesn't that work? I got hello, comma world. Don't forget there's a default value. This is basically doing this by default. So you want to make sure you pass it in with some kind of value, whatever you want to space or separate it, each value with. If we did a, again, no space, it's going to make it one big word. If we do a space, it's going to add space between, and that's going to give us what we wanted. So this is the shorthand, the quickest way to do it. Nice and dirty. Even though the brute force is like you wrote all this code to make this happen, right? But Seneca, thank you for the follow. We could actually write our own join. So let me do function join R for array. I guess I can just say array. Paste our old code that we had in there, uncomment it, and which one do we want to keep? I don't want to keep this one because it was confusing, but let's go back to our original code that we had here, and we'll uncomment that. So now instead of words, we called it array, so I'm going to change that words all to array. And I'm going to delete this. We'll keep that same array there. I do need to make a let sentence, and that's going to be an empty string. And then at the end, return sentence. So I basically abstracted our code out from this main solution in here. Up to this function here. So now we can call that function. Instead of doing a word.join, we can call our own function that we wrote and say join words. We're calling the join function that we made, and the array is going to be the words. And then that should work the same. I could just make this a const now since I don't need to overwrite it. That works fine, and then I could shorten up even more since again, I'm duplicating it here, just straight return it with join. And there it is. The benefit of doing it this way, breaking it out, is if you're going to reuse this code somewhere else, like join is a pretty common thing. We wouldn't need to write it because JavaScript has it built in. But if we wrote some custom functionality, put it in a function, I can reuse this function in multiple places. And this is a huge part of refactoring. This is what you should really be getting to. This is what separates the junior devs from the mid-level devs and higher, is that a junior dev will just write code and put it anywhere. Mid-level dev, I would expect you to start knowing how to efficiently use code. You've learned how to write the guts of it, but how to organize and structure your code is really a big next step for you. So now that I've written this method, this function, I know how it works, I know what it does, I can reuse it in multiple places. If I find a bug in it later on, I can fix it in one place and it's gonna be good to go. So let's say we wanted to mimic the regular join. Right now we're forcing it to join it on a space. Oh, spammer, hold on. Why aren't my mod commands on? Because, there we go.
Listen, shut up for a second.
I've never got to use that before. When I ban someone, it automatically plays that. Pretty cool, huh? It leaves their chat in my chat though. It's kind of a bummer. Let's do another Katas link to kind of clear it out. A little better. A little better. So right now we're joining. We're not really doing a join. We're creating it as a sentence. So this might have been better named as like sentence. Convert to words to sentence, whatever. Let's make it an option for them to pass in the character. So we'll say separator. And you can set default values in here if you want. So we could say the separator is just, actually to mimic the regular join, let's say it's just a comma. So we don't pass anything in. And then instead of using our space, we want to use the separator. And now if we ran it, this will behave like the regular join. Hello, comma, world. And if we want to pass in our own value, we can just do that. Cool. So we built our own function there. And I think that should be good. Our own reusable function. I think that should be it. Oh, well, I do want to show you a better way to do this. So anytime you have a loop when you're doing the I++ and you're kind of iterating over things like this, this could much easier be a for in loop. So I can say let word in array. And this is going to be a shorthand for basically going over the array and getting each value and setting it to word. So now I can replace this ugly syntax with word and it's a lot more readable. Sentence plus separator plus word. Oh, it's not in, it's of. I get it mixed up all the time. For of, okay. So in gave us the array indexes and of gives us the array values. I always get those mixed up. And this could be a const because we're not overriding word at all. So this would be a lot easier. This is your next step when going from the I++ version. You're gonna wanna get to this. And then an alternative way, not necessarily better, but alternative way to write this would be to use a like a map or a for each. We'll start with for each. So instead of doing like a for loop like this, we can say array.for each. And we're going to we have to give that one a callback. So once you learn the higher order functions, you're gonna be using these a lot. What this does is this is a shorthand function callback, and it's gonna run for each item in the array. So I can basically take the old code I had. This is an extra one down there. Paste it in there, and now I get the word in here. So like similar to naming const word, I get the value here and I can name it whatever I want. I'm gonna name it word. If I run that, it runs the same. What it's doing is going over each item and then running this whole callback. In this case, you could use a for each or a map. The difference is a for each will just run this. It won't return anything specific, but if I change it to a map, it will run the same as a for each, but it also is going to, any value that I return here is going to be returned. Like, so if I return sentence and I say this is const sent, and I'm gonna console.log sent and run that, you'll see it starts out as it's an array of nothing in this first one for an empty array. For the word, it basically converts it back to what it was because I'm not doing anything to the data. Actually, it grows it each time. This is the first iteration, this is the second iteration, this is the third, fourth, fifth, etc. It does more and more. We don't need that here because we're actually joining it in the specific way, so we wouldn't use a map here. You would use a reduce, but I'm not even going to go into that. A reduce will take an array of values and reduce it down to a single value. So you could use a reduce to do this, but I'm not going to confuse you with that just yet. So this is probably the easiest solution here. Simple to read. You know, you could do a very shorthand solution. If you wanted to shorten it, you would just do the join. But we did it kind of our own way. Let's test it again. And I'm at 5. Let's see how many points I get for it. 2 points. Outstanding. Take your time to refactor/comment. Submit when ready. I usually just get it all the way done if I already know. But I've already refactored it, so I will submit that. So, shortest answer, words.join. That's what a lot of people got. A lot of people, interesting. Use strict. Wow, they must have searched and copied that or something, because I don't see why they would add the use strict. I'm not going to go into that, but you don't need to add use strict. This is a shorthand. This also looks copied because people see how it has this comment in there. It looks like they copied it from somewhere. Another shorthand, just different strings. This is like, yeah, this is very programmatic. So you could have started with this. This is even more brute force than I did, but this is very confusing to read. You wouldn't want to get to that solution, or you can use that, but then you would want to submit that. Hey, Kim, thanks for tuning in. Nice to catch you. Kim, shout out Kimmy. I guess you don't have anything on your channel, huh? But Kim streams on the DigitalOcean channel on Tuesdays. Go check her out over there for some Kubernetes, DevOps, site reliability. DigitalOcean TV. Who owns DigitalOcean? Wow. Come hang out. DigitalOcean TV. There we go. That's the right one for real, okay, y'all? Trim, we haven't seen that one yet. Trim is a shorthand built in JavaScript to trim off white space off the beginning and end of a string. So in this case, they didn't actually need that, but we could have used our sentence where we had the space at the beginning and then used .trim to get rid of that space at the beginning. So not a lot of crazy solutions for this one, but those are cool. Let's go look at a 7Q, shall we? 42 minutes on 2 8Qs. I'll do a hydrate break. Try to do maybe 2 7Qs. I covered a lot of really basic stuff in this first one. As time goes on, I'll get more quicker with them and not mention every little thing, but I wanted to cover those for anyone new who might not have known those things. They're handy tips to have along the way. What Q are you, Kim, in Code Wars? What's your ranking? Okay, so search for popularity too. I didn't do that last time. And I want 7 Qs. Yeah, finite. Yeah, that's why I don't go much beyond like 5 Qs, because they do get very mathy, and I'm not really good at those, to be honest. There are some that I found that are like, build a SQL generator, you know, and that's a cool one because that is a real world challenge that I would say would be valuable to do. But it's not as like in your head, but it's a lot more coding, like writing a lot of functions to support and edge cases and stuff like that. So it takes a lot. But the old projectular problems, I don't even know what that means. Is that like math projections, like traveling salesman stuff? Those kinds of things. Or train leaves this port at 5 p.m. and leaves this port at 2 p.m. and those kinds of problems. Is that what they call those? A vowel count. This is a pretty common one. Everyone should know how to solve this one. Let me go into there. I should have copied the even or odd as well. And then train. 7. It was the precursor to things like Code Wars. Project Euler. Yeah. I read that wrong. I read that as one word. Too mathy for me. I mean, algebra's honestly like where I stop. I don't think I ever took calculus or any higher than that. But understanding algebra is pretty important for coding. But that's like 7th grade math now, or 8th grade. Maybe do it for a couple of years in high school, I don't know. But the basic, return the number of vowels in a given string. A, E, I, O, U for this kata, but not Y. You've been working through the codicimal problems lately. They get kind of monotonous. What are those ones? Yeah, all these coding sites I've never heard of. So this problem is a very common problem that you're gonna need to create your own data structure to count these things. And you're gonna be reusing these kinds of things all the time in Code Katas, so learn them and learn them well. Code signal. Oh, so is it more targeted towards interview prep? That's cool, and you get a score and stuff. Yeah, I mentioned HackerRank, and that one's kind of harder, I think, but everyone, check this out if you want to do some more training. It sounds like this might have a path more, and they actually rank you in a more specific way for interviewing specific things. So there's a billion of these out here. So first of all, they give you this code here. It's not really helpful. You don't have to use this code. You don't have to start with vowels count. Personally, I like to start from scratch. I would just delete all this. And so I'm gonna get a string in. The string is going to be all kinds of characters. Strings, there's a few ways you could break it apart. You could use those for loops and, you know, pull one off one by one. But JavaScript does that for you. Characters equals dot split. So dot join, dot split, you're gonna be using these a lot in Code Katas as well. I need to add that in here. Split, join, map, filter, etc. It's funny that like this modulus is probably a really hard one to start with because you have to know how that works. But once you know it, you know it. I haven't had to determine if something's even or odd in like years. Yeah, I haven't done it in a while. Reduce is great, yeah. Reduce, but I think a lot of people they don't know reduce very well, but you can do a lot with reduce, and so I do think you should learn it eventually, but you need to know the basics like map and filter first before you get to reduce. So split is basically the opposite of join. Right now we're looking at join. Let's look at spit. Spit? No, split. But split is on a string because join is on an array. You're joining it to a string. Split is taking a string and breaking it up to an array. So you can split on a specific character for a space, and this will give us all of the words basically. So we're doing the opposite of what we did before. If we don't pass anything, it's not going to do anything, I think. Let's see, console.log characters. Yeah, it just gives us the full word. But if we change it to a space, we could split on words in a sentence. There's no sentence in this example here. I could return another test. So let's do another test real quick. Let's say the dog jumped. The dog jumped. How many vowels are in there? 1, 2, 3, 4. If I counted it right. So this is how we can add our own test if we wanted to. The dog jumped. It broke it up into words there. The dog jumped. We don't actually need to break it up into words though. We want to break on just every single character, so just an empty string will break it up into every single character for us. So you get a lot longer. And then once we have that, it's now an array. We can just loop over it. So we can do characters. Again, you can do the for loop. Let's start with that. For const char of characters. And then I want to check if this character is a vowel. But let's see, like first we would probably write a function for it. Well, let's just write it in here first. So we'll say they did actually want to keep that. So let vowel count equals 0. We'll start with 0, and then I always try to make sure to add the return right away so you don't get caught up with the return undefined. I can run it. It's not doing all the tests yet, but returning zeros. Getting hungry again. It's almost time for dinner. Just kidding, it's only 3 here. I'll probably try to go till 3:30, so another 20 minutes or so. So each of the cars, so it would be each of the characters, and then I want to test what are vowels. So say const, I have to know what the vowels are. I'm going to make an array of them and say A, E, I, O, U, no Y, they said in their description, so we don't need Y. There, you can loop over this to find it, but I frequently, if you have an array of strings or numbers or primitive values like that, booleans, etc., you can compare them super easily by just doing vowels dot includes a value. So I'm going to say, does it include this character? So I can say if vowels includes car. I also find it to be very easy to read, right? It's easy to understand what's happening here. Then vowel count. I could do equals val count plus 1. This is the most verbose way to do it. Another shorthand would be to add a plus equals. It's going to take the current value and add this to it. This is great if you're doing like plus equals 5 or different numbers. If you're just going to do 1, you can do this super shorthand, which is plus plus. And I think this should work. Boom, it works. But we could simplify it more. Since we're doing some val checking here, I might want to pull that out and make it a utility method. So I might do like is vowel and just do it for a single, oops, not a fat arrow, for a single character. And then I can move this out. I'll move my vowels. They can just keep them in here. And that will return Vling. Yes, you can make suggestions if you'd like. You could do the vowels here, and then I could add this code. Just basically return if the vowels includes this specific character. It's a very small function, but it is easy to use. So if is vowel there, and I basically now I have this reusable is vowel function. So if I needed to check it somewhere else, then I could do that. Again, if I'm only writing this code in one place, I would probably leave it inline. Once you start using it in multiple places, once you start duplicating code, that means you need to start tidying it up. Because the reason you want to do that is because if you have this code in multiple places and you find something wrong with it, it now has a problem in 2 places instead of 1. You always want to try to reduce it down to one place that you can find it to find the problem. Because if you fix it in that one place, it now inherits it everywhere you've used it. So that's good to kind of refactor. It's called abstraction. You're abstracting out functionality from your code. I now have this function that I can just call. I know how it works. I know what it does. If I need to add a new case for it, like someday I want to add Y to the list, I can just add it in this one spot, and it works everywhere. So you could write the for here. You could do a dot for each. You could do a map. Let's think of other ways that we could do it. Did you have a suggestion, Van Ling? I could do another shorthand here. So I could say, like, comment this out. Another way to write this would be val count plus equals, and then do a ternary. So I could say is vowel car, and then if I want to return testing it before I jabba the nonsense. Good idea, good idea. So if it's true, I want to add 1, otherwise 0. Because adding 0 won't change it at all, so this should work. There it is. Anytime you're doing ternaries with 1, 0 like this, or true and false, that's a hint that you can refactor it to be simpler. So for here, I could adjust my is vowel to return just 1 or true. Right now it's returning a Boolean. Dot includes returns true or false. I could basically move this up here and it would do that, but that is kind of confusing for me to return just a number from here. You could do this with regex. This is a case where you could use regex to make it happen, but you probably wouldn't do that in the real world because it's just confusing for other people to read regex. Let's check out Van's solution. So they did it all like in kind of a one-liner. Let me duplicate it. So we want to return what they had, and then we'll break apart what they had. I'm gonna rename this one temporarily so they don't collide. Okay, so they're starting with the string. In this case, the abracadabra is the string. So let's say string.split. Let me break this down for you. Onto different lines so it's easier to read. Okay, so string split. After this, our value is gonna be the array, like abracadabra, all the words and the characters. And then we're gonna run a dot filter on that value. We haven't used the dot filter yet, but what it does is it allows you to run this callback on it and say, does this, you return true or false? If you return true, it will include it in the new output. If you return false, it will exclude it. So after this, this is basically filtering out our vowels. I have the vowels here. So this is their example of like our vowels list. Let's call it vowels. And then we'll just use our vowels list. So we're gonna say the letter, vowels includes letter, and then they're gonna filter it down to just the ones that match that condition, and then they'll just say length. So yeah, but this does instead is, see, we were doing it and incrementing a counter along the way. They're doing it and then filtering down the array, and then at the end you just say dot length to count it. So this is a whole nother way to do it. We could write this one-liner in our function up here, but this would work too, I think. Yep, passes. I didn't change anything but the variable names to point to the same kind of values, so it passes there. This is why people hate JS, because there is so many ways to do things. They're like, well, which do I do? What is right? And to me, it's like, I prefer the most readable code, because if other people's are writing it, I always try to write it for the developer who might not know JavaScript as well as me. JavaScript gets a lot of people who are back-end devs or other kind of developers having to write JavaScript for their job, but they're not JavaScript developers. They don't like JavaScript. So I try to make it easy enough for them to edit, if that's on your team. But if they don't understand things like, that's why I avoid reduces sometimes, because they might understand them. They might understand this chaining and stuff. Like chaining is called like this when you do dot split and then dot filter and then dot length. You're doing them in succession instead of different steps. Most beginners write their code like this. That's why I'm writing it like that, because they understand that, I think, and I'm trying to show them how to get to this version down the line, like to understand what's going on here. So yeah, but that's why those map and filters are so handy once you start learning them, because they can really clean up your code and reduce the amount of code you have to write once you get to that point. Yeah, Van, there's just a billion ways to do it. I showed a couple, so yeah, I would like to show all the different ways you can do it. I didn't write, I'm not gonna write them all out myself off the top of my head, but this is a good way. I say this is not hacky or whatever. I mean, it's doing the same steps that we would do, but just using the array the whole time, which is pretty easy. And another handy little thing here is now that we've written, so if you've written this is val, you can even shorten this if you wanted to take out their, you can just pass is val as a value. What it does is it passes the function as a value. Filter down to vowels only. This would be like A, and then what else? Abracadabra. There's a lot of A's in abracadabra. So that would get us down to this, and then on raise you could just count the length. But I could do filter is val, and what it's going to do is going to run this, get the character, and do the same thing. I'll keep all those. Attempt. There it is. It's got them all. Submit. We're still at a 7Q. I wonder how many points. I wonder if we need to do one more. Let's try one more real quick. Can I do it in 10 minutes? Let me go back here. Say 7. Popularity. You can also do katas I have not trained on. So if I've already finished some, like I'd had val count, you see it was in the list. Show the check mark, meaning I'd done it already. Katas I have not trained on. Highest and lowest. Let's try this one. The highest value and the lowest value. So there's a lot of problems with breaking this up and getting this into the value you need, but oh Van, hey, thanks. Yeah, thanks for watching the Directus stuff. We built some cool stuff on Directus if you want to go into those. It's been a little while since I've touched those things. I've just got, a billion projects. I do jump around a lot. So I will get back to those someday, but the Directus stuff is pretty cool. I like it. I'm going to keep using it, keep building on it with my project. Let's try high and low. Train. So this one I might write some pseudocode because there's a few steps. Yeah, actually, Cypher is the one who told me about Directus. So thanks for the tip. It was well worth it. I love it. I feel a hair in my eye. Okay, so first we need to split the string apart to numbers. And then we want to loop over numbers. And then we want to find the low and find the high. Those will probably need more detail once we get to them, but let's start by splitting it. So let's say const numbers, and it's gonna equal numbers dot split. We'll do it on these spaces because that's what they're having us do here. A lot of times I try to figure out what they want based on just this. Sometimes you'll get code challenges where they give you inputs and outputs and say, write the code for it. So you might not even need to read. You might not have this description. You might just have this. So try to go, if you need to use a description, you can, but if you can get it off of this, that's good too. It's good practice. And then from there, let's console log numbers to see what it is. So this one's, numbers, that's right. Let's call it number string because that's what it really is. I redeclared the numbers and it's mad about that. Oh, number string, I didn't change it. I changed it in one place, but not two. There we go. Okay, so now I can see what I'm getting for numbers. I'm getting all the individual numbers. Notice how they're all strings. This is what I mean about you need to do a lot of type checking in these code katas because they throw these little side things for you. And part of this code challenge is to see, do you know how to work with types in JavaScript? Are you aware that JavaScript has problems with types and how to fix those problems? It's one of the top things my friend tests for in coding interviews. He gives people a basic problem like sum an array of numbers, and then once you do it and you solve it with the basic solution, he throws in true, false, and other non-number values, and then asks you to solve it for that, because it does throw people off. In this case, I'm going to skip some of the long ways of doing them and show you these shorthands. So right now, this splits it up into an array of strings that happen to be numbers. What we can do is map over that and convert them. So I can do a dot map, and a map goes over all of the items in the array and returns a new value. And I'll say str, it's gonna give me a string. And then I'll just say number, if I spell it right, capital N. This is built into JavaScript. This is the number constructor. It's going to convert this string to a number and then return that result. So my numbers here is gonna have an array of actual numbers now. Now you can see there's no quote around them, so they're all numbers. But again, now we need to loop over and find the highs and lows. Since we're gonna loop over it anyway, we could convert that in the loop later on. I would probably just do this up front, but I have a feeling if this was a higher one, they might throw in some edge cases where string is not actually a number, and then that would give us problems. We'll see if we can do it without it. If not, 1 + 2 = true, yeah. Yeah, be careful with types in JavaScript. If you're writing a TypeScript application, you should be fine, but not fine. I mean, there's still cases where you get data from an API and you can't trust that the data from the API is always gonna come back in the right way, so you should be defensive in your coding, meaning you should be checking this stuff. Right now, this code seems to be working fine, but it would fail if they handed me like a true or a false or text that was not a number. And they might end up doing that in our final code later on. We'll see. Okay, so now we want to go through, I'll delete our log. We want to go through and loop over the numbers. Again, I'll do a simple for loop. We'll stick with that for now. For const num of numbers. And then this is what I want to do inside my loop. Find the low and find the high. So the technique that I do for this, when you have a value that you're kind of like overriding along the way, is you do what, I don't know if they really call it this, but I learned it as accumulated values. So let's say let low num, I'm gonna start it with 0, and I'll say let high num equals 0 as well. I'm gonna assume this is okay. There could be cases where this doesn't work, but we'll find those later. So find the low. And then we can just do simple if else. We could say if num is lower than numbers, not numbers, num is lower than the low num, then I can update it. Low num equals num. And I could do an else if num is greater than high num, then high num is equal to num. And then at the very end, they want us to return it in this specific format here, 42 minus 9. It's basically the high number space and the low number. So let's say return, first thing you might do is like high num plus space plus low num. And I think that could work. Let's try it out. expected 0 to equal 3.0 to equal 3.1. Interesting. I wonder what is test 2? It gives us 1, 2, 3. Let's do a console log of the numbers. Ah, this is a gotcha on my fault that I created. So console log numbers. Test it. Third one fails. You see we got 1, 2, and 3 for the numbers. So I think it's 0 because there's no zeros in here. It's 0 because I started these at 0. So this would loop through and it would say 1, 2, 3. So 1, if 1 is lower than 0, then low num, it's not because 0 is lower. So I can't start with 0. Let's start these here then. In that case, I have a feeling that would bite me. If low num is undefined, meaning we haven't given it a value yet, then set low num to the number. And I'd want to do the same for the high num too. I'll just start them both as this number, high num, and then I'll let it fix itself afterwards. Okay, that works, but that's kind of feels a little janky, you know? We've got this, we're handling our edge cases up front here. We're basically resetting the low num and the high num to the first value, and then we, do our checks after that, update them as needed. We could do that a shorthand outside up here. If we put it after the numbers, we could say num bracket 0 to make the first number the low and the high. That could be a problem if there is no number in there, but let's not worry about that for now. That would allow us to get rid of this code here. So it makes it a little shorter. This should be numbers. And that works. This would fail if we did the split and there were no valid numbers in there. But maybe they don't do that to us. Okay, so now it passed all of our tests. Let's see. One thing I would change is instead of concatenating like this, again, I would make it an array and then do a dot join. Join it with the space. Advantage of doing it this way is if we ever wanted to add more values, we could just simply add another one. Start num, etc., whatever. And it's super easy. It's just more flexible than doing the plus way. Vanling's got the math tricks. Nice. Yeah, most people don't know about min and max. That's actually the easiest way to do it. I just started using those somewhat a couple years ago. I always forget about them. So this would work. Let's check out Van Lang's answer here. Let's see if it works. function high and low. You're a hacker, huh, Van? So you were like doing these two different things here. Those, you guess how you're getting your min and your max, and then doing a join, basically. Oh, you used my name. That's my bad. You just have them flipped. So we could put that one first. There you go. So there's a shorthand. There's a lot of trickiness going on in here, though, that you'd have to know how this works, like dot apply, the way that works and stuff. With this, because it returns an array and it applies all the args. But we can do a similar one with math, those math ones. Building production stuff for 15 plus years. Yeah, you know what you're doing. Are you normally a JavaScript dev, or have you now recently come into it? What are your programming languages you're usually using? So math.min and math.max allow you to do this. We could take low num, and instead of doing the if check all around, cool. Yeah, I built, some websites, HTML, CSS stuff, and then I started doing PHP work for a long time. And then JavaScript came to the front end, and I switched to JavaScript because I'm mostly a front end developer, but I do full stack stuff. So we can say low num is equal to math.min num low num, and just reset it every single time. And we'll do the same for the high. But we switch low num to high num, and math min to math max. What this does is every time it's going to overwrite our low num value, and math.min is going to say, okay, of all the values you give me, I will automatically return the minimum one for you. So math, this is built into JavaScript. This is going to do your dirty work, your dirty checking for you. And this is super easy to do. So let me go back to my version, make sure this still works. Yep. And I'm sure you can do this with a reduce pretty fancy little way too, but this also works as well. A lot of ways to do it. Are you familiar, Van, with the reduces? You say you're pretty good at them, or? Let me write a reduce one for you. No, I don't want to write it. I don't want to confuse anyone. I don't want you to just dive into it right at the end like this, but I'm happy with this. What else would I change? This, again, this could be a problem if you were going to submit this code in like a code thing. I would say you'd have to fix this. The way you could fix it is you would have an additional check. You'd say if numbers.length, or if there's no numbers.length, then whatever value you'd want to return. Maybe it would be an empty string, and that would handle it. So this would be if there were no values in the numbers after you did the split and everything, it would return early. And so otherwise these would break because this would try to access a value, or it would be undefined. It would start undefined. Well, maybe not. I'm not sure if mathmin, maybe it works with undefines. Let's see. I might be able to just take this out. No, not a number, because it converts the undefines to not a numbers. So, nope. Can't do that. This is the types thing. You gotta learn, like, what is it converted to? How do the types work in JavaScript? It's good to know. Attempt, and I'll save it, and then I'll call that a day. Let me write this one down. What's it called? Highest and lowest. And this is going to be type checking, type conversion, accumulator, I think that was mostly it. I don't remember what the val count had in there. What do we do for the val count? Reference data. Another one like this. I gotta go soon, so maybe next time, but we'll get to the reduces someday. They're definitely handier in the maybe the 7s, maybe the 6s queues. It had reference data. Find matches. I don't know. That's good enough for me. I will update this. Okay, and this is out there. If you want to see it, there it is again. But thank you for hanging out. I'll submit this. And now I'm up to 11. Our amps go to 11. Still not a 7 queue though. Even though I solved a couple. So they rank you based on, I think, how many points, but also around the difficulty that you have too. You can't just do like 8 queues all day and then get to a 5, you know? You have to solve the harder problems as well, so. Cool. Well, let's start ending stream task. Ending stream. Task next. Thank y'all for tuning in. Thanks for watching. Thanks for the follows. Thanks for hanging out. Vanling, I'll see you another time. I usually stream at night. I don't know what time you're usually on, but I'm in mountain time, and this is just one of the rare times I've kind of done a daytime stream. But I wanted to do these coding katas, kind of starting from scratch, and work my way up again. We'll get some harder ones. I like the 6 keys. I think they're good level to be at. A good mix of challenging and all that. Oh, it's late for you. All right. So maybe you'd catch me in the morning even if I was late enough, because I would probably, it'd be really early for you, I think. Anyway. Let me see if there's anyone that we can raid. I can raid your boy Chow. He's streaming right now. He's writing top tier SQL.
I came here because my choice was simple.
Ads. Don't respect reduced functions in the morning. Yeah, I'm not a morning coder either. I'm actually a late night coder, and a lot of people struggle at night, but I struggle during the morning because I'm just not very awake. It takes me a while. That's why I do a lot of my streams later at night. But let's go over there. We'll say hi to Chow. He's working on SQL. If you want to get some SQL chops, I am okay with SQL. I prefer to just use something that does the code for me. Nice and easy. But let's go see him. Catch you all next time. Oh, let's do, is it ending or end? Yep. There's all my socials, all the things you can check out. I will add a new section on my site for these Code Katas. Van Ling, thank you for the Prime sub. I appreciate it. Welcome, welcome. Hope to see you again next stream. All right, see you on the other side.